Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And I'm really excited. I'm really enthusiastic to be on today. Apologize for not having as much content out as I would like, but, I'm here. I'm ready to go. And I'm ready to talk some Florida football as Florida knocks off LSU 27-16 at the Swamp. And man, does it feel great to be a Gator. I mean, going into this game, the expectations were slim. LSU has, they've been reeling. They've been such an up and down team, and in many ways, it really kind of was in a way, sort of a stepping stone for him in a sense. I mean, you were in that peripheral of knowing that your season is in essence over in terms of a playoff picture because you lost Alabama the week before, and many people were looking at this as kind of in a way a comeback game for them because they were playing a Florida team for the most part who was pretty banged up, particularly on the defensive side. You didn't have Montrell Johnson, their leading rusher, who is a really great weapon. And also, there were some question marks in terms of DJ Lagway too. And, of course, you had Aiden Warren who started against Georgia and, didn't do very well. But, but in terms of seeing Lagway though, I mean, he definitely didn't necessarily lay out the stat sheet. I mean, 13 for 26 for 226 yards and 1 touchdown. However, he found his best target in Elijah Badger, just enough to be able to disrupt this LSU defense. And in terms of this game, in terms of Florida, there are a couple of things that stuck out to me. And obviously, we're going to start with the offensive side of the ball. Now, yes, they did win the game, and there are a lot of positives to talk about. But I think one thing that is absolutely clear to me is the play calling between, the difference between Billy Napier calling plays for Graham Mertz versus DJ Lagway is night and day. And you can tell the difference to a number of different aspects. For me, the biggest thing that I saw was particularly being able to use your athleticism enough to extend plays. Because the one thing that LSU had to do throughout that game was respect the pass. And, even going into the season, the one big question mark in terms of LSU was their defense, particularly their defensive line, in the sense of they didn't spend a lot of NIL or transfer portals at that position. And a lot of people were asking themselves, hey, is their defense good enough to be able to complement LSU's offense in a way where they can keep up with them and possibly be in the contention for the SEC? But to me, this game was really a testament to the struggles that LSU is seeing on the defensive side of the ball, particularly in the defensive line. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Florida has a great offensive line because they don't. But at the same time, they're a young team, and a lot of people, haven't really kind of came to that realization in some sense because, what's been amazing lately is, 2 weeks ago, everybody was saying how much Scott Strickland is a stupid idiot moron, and all of a sudden now everybody thinks he's the best thing ever. And meanwhile, if you go back to my clip, I commended Scott Strickland and Florida's president and everybody on the board to pretty much say, hey, I really do believe in Billy, and I've consistently defended him on this show. Do I think that there could be better coaches out there? Possibly, but I articulated about the buyout. I talked about how the players really like him, and I think that definitely it was a testament to all those things on Saturday as Florida perhaps got their biggest win under Billy Napier in these past 3 seasons. And obviously, now let's make one thing clear too. DJ Lagway even said, on Twitter too, that he implied it, but in essence he said, hey, I'm happy that Billy's back. And it probably is a large reason why we should anticipate seeing him back in next season, which is a huge positive too. Now, granted, they're definitely going to have to recruit at least another quarterback or two to possibly have someone behind them, and also to have somebody develop in the instance where Lagway would be injured, for example. But at the same time, one thing that I'm really admiring about what Billy Napier is kind of setting up right now is their reliance right now on in general on high school recruiting. And yes, you're going to have to ramp up that recruiting class to be in the top 10, top 15 if you really want to make a national title run next season. But for the time being, I mean, the good news is you have your foundational pieces on the offensive side of the ball. You have DJ Lagway. I think Jaden Bowe, he, especially in that 55-yard run to seal the deal, definitely you can tell he's going to be a guy that they're going to have to rely on a bunch next year. And for the most part, I did watch a bunch of spring training, and when I first saw him, I was sitting there thinking to myself, man, he could be a great third down back going into this season. He could definitely get some touches, but the offense would definitely have to be generally dependent on Montrell Johnson, his ability. But for Jaden Bowe to be able to step in immediately and be able to make that big of a step of that big of a development, and being able to find the open holes and being that explosive and quick enough to be able to close out games like that and be a legitimate weapon is definitely exciting to watch too, especially when the past couple of weeks, we've had wide receivers who haven't been able to get open as much. And, in some instances, particularly at the beginning of the season, the offensive line struggled immensely to try to protect Graham Mertz. And, even in DJ Lagway's first start outside of the Sanford game, he, in many ways, yes, he is quick enough to be able to get out of the pocket too, but there is going to come a point in time where he's not going to have that luxury to be able to just scramble outside of the pocket, extend plays, and be able to rely himself on it. I think that's going to be the big question in terms of Lagway, in terms of it's not necessarily his intangibles, because what you see on the when you see on the tape is absolutely incredible. I mean, he made just some absolutely terrific plays, especially that 140-yard pass that led to their initial first score. Just for him to have that natural arm talent, feet aren't set, and to hit him right on stride. I mean, that's just something incredible. And you can say all you want about Billy Napier shitting the bed at the beginning of the season, but the reality is that him and his staff would be able to find some gems, and they know where to find talent, and they've been patient enough to develop them. And to me, this is definitely one of those examples that I attest to over and over and over again, that especially in college football, you just simply have to be patient more. And I say this over and over again every single time that a head coach gets fired. For the most part, you're going to hear me on this show 8 times out of 10 typically defend the head coach, in the sense of a lot of the time it's not necessarily justified. I mean, granted, you have exterior or interior factors that necessarily isn't going to get heard about from the general outside, but at the same time, you do have to kind of tamper those expectations, in a sense of not everything is such a now process. And for it to be in this moment too, it's definitely incredible to see too. And just to briefly touch on LSU too, it's not like LSU didn't have opportunities in this game too. They've had a number of really strong drives, really long drives, to the point where points could have been scored on the board. However, they just left too many of them out there, especially when you think about the past three weeks, dating back to the Texas A&M game. There have been a number of times where they've gone down the field, they've had 13, 14, 15 play drives, even extending 75 yards plus, and they come out with either a field goal or even no points at all. And there are a couple different elements you can look at this too. I think, for one, you can definitely sense the frustration mounting between Brian Kelly and all of the wide receivers, which unobjectively speaking was pretty hilarious to watch. I mean, at least for me, it was like pure comedy watching Brian Kelly on the sidelines too, especially for those who even remember when Brian Kelly was once the head coach of Notre Dame, and for that all to kind of come to fruition, and then him take the LSU job, thinking he's going to win a national title, and then now everything's kind of coming all together too as he finishes up his third year at LSU. And granted too, I think a lot of people have slept on Florida's defensive line. They really got to Garrett Nussmeier this weekend. They had seven sacks on the weekend, and I would argue one of the biggest, if not the biggest reason why Florida was able to pull out this victory too. Yes, we had the explosive plays when necessary. Yes, we didn't. Yes, we were relatively disciplined, all things considered. However, to me, it was the defensive line and those sacks where that really told the difference too, because especially when you have such a young team like Florida, you have to find every situation possible to be able to take less pressure off your secondary and not have DJ Lagway out as much too, because I touched on it earlier. They don't have as much depth as you would like. They've had injury situations, throughout the season too, and for it to come to this, I mean, it was just incredible too, because I mean, you know, I highly doubt anybody really thought going into this game, including myself, that Florida was even going to win, much less by two possessions too. So when you put this all together, there are a couple of general takeaways that you can take from Florida, but even still, just to think that with the schedule that Florida has this year, that they can get into a bowl game, I mean that's incredible too. I mean, they either have to beat Ole Miss or Florida State, which Florida, they're certainly favored versus Florida State right now. So we should, generally speaking, be anticipating a bowl game appearance from Florida, which, who would have thought that? But I mean, if you go back to my episode from all the way in August, I even did insinuate if you have a 5-7, 6-6 season, that would be an incredible season in my opinion. So definitely check that out if you want to fact check me on Florida Gators, but definitely an excellent win. I think it showed grit. I think it showed resilience. It showed determination. And most importantly, it showed that Florida is heading in the right direction. And as we go into the latter halves of the year, definitely you have to hope that Florida comes out strong, gets to a bowl game appearance, and really, really goes strong in terms of the transfer portal and high school recruiting.